Philosophers talk to our times towards theories of common notions. I think I just made that plural. It's probably right. This is going to be a personal one, in that I want to talk a bit about how common notions change lives. And I haven't got anybody else's life to talk about, so I shall have to talk about my own, which I hope is at least mildly interesting. I'll try to keep it as short as possible and as theoretical as possible. One of the things that Spinoza doesn't say, and he doesn't say it about common notions, is that common notions, because they augment a human's power, they make them capable of acting in more ways, allow them to reach out to one another, elusively catch them up in strange, wild new dances, are beset with inadequate ideas. Because the more you know, the more power you have, the more you can dream. The more the ideas that you thought were gone and left behind start to resonate again in your mind, the more all sorts of other things feel possible. For emotion is emotion. And unless you are a veritable detective of emotions, able to separate self-esteem from pride, for example, or approval from blind love, emotions flow from adequate to inadequate ideas in the opening of an eye. It follows then that a man of reason, a human of reason, insofar as they are following reason, are also beset by greater temptations to break with reason and bolt hither and thither towards relations to the worlds of power that have been opened up to them, the new domain of pride and of good and of evil. Now, this is particularly true, and this is where my life experience is going to come in, I'm afraid, once you move beyond very abstract ideas. So, for instance, if you're dealing with that royal road of reason, mathematics, common notions are already quite clear. It's quite clear where the common notion is. The common notion in something like numbers is the theory of number. Or the common notion for algebra is understanding what it means to be doing analytical reasoning, to be pulling things apart. And that comes with time. It comes with lots of examples, lots of trials. When I'm teaching maths, I always give a certain regime, a way you write it down. I'm in, I think, the 3 types of knowledge, it's the second one of the first type. And I give them a very strong rule. This is a rule of writing. But after they've done the rule of writing myriad times, they start to actually understand and appreciate the rule for itself, and are at the gateways of the common notion of the theory of number. And now a theory that opens out into whole new ways of understanding. I said equations, didn't I? If you're doing equations, it opens you up to a whole new gateway to the theory of analysis, which actually does happen at GCSE maths. With the ratios, I slipped, you see. It opens you up into the gateways to the theory of number. Sorry about that. Hope that was clearer. But the point is that the common notion, once it's established, is fixed and is eternal, as in you as it is in somebody else. It's communicatable, it's pickable up, it's always doing something, always useful. Constantly challenges you to change, to look at other theories, other things that you could do with that theory. Falls all the categories then. It is active in the mind. And when I'm thinking about common notions, I know Spinoza moves from the geometric examples to the chemical examples, as Deleuze notes. Absolutely. But as a maths tutor, you always felt as if you were being chemical anyway. And the kind of maths, the analytical maths, the theory of numbers is much more dynamic than the kind of geometry that was available to Spinoza, and makes a very good fit for understanding when you have to fall back to think what common notions are, where they're bubbling up from, the kind of thing they are. But, to go back to my point, When you are not dealing with the royal road of mathematics or the established pathways of science, you're on a very difficult ground with common notions. Because you're making those kind of ethereal common notions that link you to other human beings, that are complicated, that vary, that are actually challenging, that will allow you to shift and change situations, to turn studios around from failing to succeeding, all sorts. I'm just emotionally, not financially, I'm not very good with money. But they allow you to transform how humans understand themselves. But in the course of my life, time and time again, more than a dozen times, let me be really brutally honest with myself, it makes me sound my life too exciting, but at least around a dozen times, I have successfully established common notions with individuals, and we've thought through a situation. And almost immediately, what then happens is that the new powers that opens up, the new possibilities that opens up, creates a whole set of prides and arrogances that warp in. And so that one or t'other of us, it has to be said it usually isn't me, immediately wants to break with the common notion and go off and do something else, because they haven't really realised what it was that was going on. And you could say, well, it couldn't have been a common notion, but it kind of was. But my point, I think, is that all common notions are surrounded by very loud babbles of inadequate ideas. To go back to the example I was doing yesterday of the man striking down. Of course that is true. A man striking down could be a blacksmith or could be a murderer. But the action and the feeling, the action of moving the hand and the feeling on the muscle would be the same. Likewise, all adequate ideas, as they increase power, delude humans into thinking that somehow or other, this is it. All the inadequate ideas, the normal algebras of their life, the reckoning up of particular situations have changed because of this extra power. And they can abandon common notions and go back, and everything will be different. When it never is. It absolutely never is. It's the alcoholic problem. You reach somebody, you get them to move on, and then they think, well, this time it will be different. This time I'll give up smoke. This time, when I start smoking, I won't smoke so much. This time when I have a little drinky, I'll stay with a little drinky. But it doesn't work that way. So that's the first tragedy of the man of reason. The second tragedy of the man of reason, and I should have probably called this episode at the beginning, the tragedies of the man of reason. The second deep tragedy is that the man of reason is caught up, a person of reason. I use man because it's just what Spinoza uses, but it is person of reason, human of reason. The reasonable individual is caught in a trap. As you want to think in terms of the will, in terms of the mind, in terms of reason, you want to reckon everything up in a good little algebra. And in book 4, towards the end, Spinoza gives you that algebra. A person of reason will always choose a greater future good, as opposed to a current lesser good, and will treat the lesser good as evil, if it stops him reaching his final destiny. And yet, of course, Spinoza says it is impossible, because we don't know the duration of things, to ever reckon up this way. Reason is therefore always pulling against the world it's in, always trying to reckon it up atemporally, trying to understand it not actually as it is, but as it would like to believe that it is. And that by itself is a danger. Reason opens up itself to its own kind of errors, as it tries to understand a world atemporally, and therefore inaccurately. And that's just within the nature of what it does, as it chooses the lesser of two evils and the greater of two goods, and it could really start to believe then that the lesser of two evils, or at least your mind can, the lesser of your two evils is in fact a good. I mean, that's just politics, isn't it? How else do you understand any Andy Burmania? He is the lesser of two evils, but that doesn't mean he's a good in his own right. Not really. Not as we'd understand it. Reason, therefore, traps us. It traps us in thoughts that aren't really true, because it's reckoning up according to a will. It's trying to create atemporality, a fixed canon of truth where no fixed canon can be, and leads men of reason into folly and into danger. But there is a third great tragedy of reason. And this is the one where I'm going to get all biographical, I think. One of the things that reason will want to do then is to try to understand, to reckon up time. Okay, because it needs to reckon up time. It needs to choose a future good, a greater future good over a lesser evil. It needs to reckon up something it can't reckon up. I mean, duration. So reason will tend to wrap things up and say, this is now. What will be in the future? What will be then? Here, you have to understand, as I think I've talked about before, about Spinoza's theory of emotion, affects. Affects imply a theory of temporality. Spinoza's theory of temporality is really it's a way of exploring the near future and the near past. He says as much. Anything in the long past, he says, will always just be in a chaosmos of different hodgy-podgies. Okay? Although he wires it up so that the feeling predates the impression. It's just the way the simple bodies work, but that's probably a different story. I need to do that, so I would need to do that very fully. But anyway, so it's not quite as simple as he presents it if you actually read what the bodies he's dealing are. But I'll come back to that another time, I think. Yeah, it would take me about 20 minutes to go through that. So but emotion is very often temporal within Spinoza. Temporal, but also incandescent. So emotions of love, that is a passage linked to something present. And you can see there's already a tension because you're moving, you're changing, but you're also seeing something there as you change. And that is the thing that you love. Is caught up with hope and with fear, with jealousy. It starts to ooze across other times as you begin to think of what will happen if the love thing isn't there, or if it is there. The emotion then creates a dynamism to how you understand how you will be, how you shall change. Who and what you are then becomes fundamentally seeped in time and temporality. It might be local temporality. It might be the kind of temporality actually that Kant is always dealing with. Not the great temporalities of Bergson, but that kind of local here and now. And for Spinoza, these are always inadequate ideas. And yet, of course, they are absolutely the stuff of our lives. They are what makes us alive at all. So reason will always be trying to reckon up time and to resolve different times, to sort through them, but it can never do it. So one of the things that reason is very good at doing then is drawing lines. I mean, with my own life, for instance, when I gave up philosophy and got rid of my philosophy books, that was a bit later. I gave up philosophy simply about 15 years ago. I gave it up simply because I couldn't financially do it. And maths teaching was getting too complicated. So I had to put more of my brain into maths teaching. But creation will out and I just became a storyteller, which is why I tell these things so dramatically. 15 years ago, I would have been properly good and boring, a proper philosopher. But I've had 15 years of storytelling since then, and making stuff and all that sort of stuff. And so what I did, you see, as a man of reason was to say, no, enough's enough. This pursuing of a future good that will probably never happen must be cut off, Matthew. And you must go off and try to make living, but also do the philosophy other ways and understand it through other actions. All of which was absolutely fine and dandy. But what, of course, the idea of reason created was that this was it. It created this idea of an absolute cut-off, that now I wouldn't be a philosopher anymore. But it never works like that. Because reason never gets itself right. It can't get itself right. So that it tends to think in terms of epochs. This was my this era. This was my that era. It's the very notion of eras that can drive me bonkers on a bad day. because it is absolutely this notion of reason. It is sourcing through time. But of course it never worked like that, because within 3 years of me giving up philosophy, I was back as a stand-up philosopher, having all the ideas bubble up again. And then when that crashed down, because I couldn't move stand-up philosophy beyond Exeter, which is where we lived at the time, I got an audience who were very used to me. And I could pack out a theatre in Exeter, but go to Bristol and nobody was interested. It was very queer. I could never get the common notion going, you see. I could only get the common notion going if people knew me. It was a very particular common notion. You had to have heard me on the local radio. You can see the entire thing is very contingent. It's very evolving. It's quite interesting, really, about when it is that you can make a common notion, when you can make it by writing, when you can make it by reputation, and when you actually need the face-to-face for people to really start to properly engage. Stand-up philosophy was like that. And I've always felt that philosophy is one of those things. It gets me when I'm trying to run away from it. I always feel a bit like Calvin trying to escape Geneva. And so with this channel, I started it off because I got tired of watching people screaming at the internet, politics. So I thought it would be quite fun to do philosophers screaming at the internet, politics. But of course, philosophy then got me, so I'm back on reading and thinking properly again. God help me. What's the point of this story? The point of this story is that reason thinks in terms of epochs. It thinks in terms of times. But actually, common notions never work that way. They are genuinely atemporal. You might run away from philosophy, but that doesn't mean that philosophy will ever give you up. It will invade your performances, shift them, turn you into a stand-up philosopher that then can't quite get the common notions going with other people. But hey, it worked for a while. Or take over your channel so that you thought you were doing one thing and it had it all in a nice, neat box. But the common notion bubbles out and says, hello, it's us again. They're not at all stable. And that is the difference then between the person following the habitual path to reason and the man of reason. The man of reason, I quite like calling him a man of reason because he's limited. The man of reason is always dividing up time. He's always treating time as if it could be understood reasonably, and is therefore always wrong. He must be wrong. He's counterfactual. And Spinoza is very clear it's counterfactual when he's discussing it in ethics. And you sit there thinking, well, why are you doing it, Benedict? Is this something we can do or something we can't do? It's something that we will do. As we follow reason, as we develop reason, we can't do anything else than be the adult in the room, thinking sensibly about our time and our time on the world, trying to divide it up into sensible durations. But, Spinoza is saying, actual common notions are always bubbling beneath that, always changing it, always subverting it, so that you think you might have left something, but that thing might have not left you. And a good common notion will always come back in some form or other. It always eternally returns, I suppose I could say. And it is very much an eternal return of difference, because it returns to change you, to allow you to transform who and what you are. They're dangerous things. We might run away from them sometimes, as my friends did when I changed when I moved them on from one situation to another. But in the end, they'll get you, because a good common notion doesn't just die. It sits and bides its time. Reason gets it right. Common notions can wait. They don't have to be at the here and now, because they're never the here of the now. They're always the transforming, that which is, making it other, making it what Spinoza calls eternal, which I tend to understand not as prolonged duration of any sort whatsoever. He clearly says it's not, but rather as the very essence of God, insofar as it is conceived as necessarily existing. That is, being in the absolute middle, where everything is constantly, always changing. You could say, what's the difference, by the way, between time and the middle, if you like? Time, as we explore it and understand it, always has a one single thread that leads us from here to there. An absolute middle doesn't work like that. It's erupting in lots of different directions. It will be temporal in that the affect, in that the attribute gives it one identity in this world. And so we will explore it as a sequence of time. But going back over those thoughts, the things that put us in the middle could always be understood will always erupt, irrespective of when they occurred in your mind. They will erupt and change you. And that is what makes a common notion so very powerful. That inability of reason to contain it within a box, to make it who and what it is. Common notions then are all around you. The game is to let them out, separate them from the emotions that surround them, and then watch as they transform your life, whether you want to or not.